Hi, Stephen from OWNorDisown. HP have been kind enough to send me the new Omen 15 X2S. Now that's the one with the screen, the second screen above the keyboard. Now I've got the Omen 15T with the i9 and 2080 Max-Q, and I will be comparing the two. And if you haven't seen that video, then make sure to click up here. So this will be an unboxing, first look, followed by a full review. So make sure to put in the comments below what you want me to test in particular. So let's have a look and see what's in the box and its specs. Now my unit starts at $2,280 and it has an i7-9758 CPU, 16 gigabytes of RAM in 2 sticks, a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, RTX 2070 Max-Q, GPU, G-Sync, 240 Hz, and a 73 watt hour battery. The Wi-Fi card is the Intel 9560. Now you can spec this out to be a bit higher. You can have the i9-9880H 8-core CPU and the 2080 Max-Q. So there's only 2 GPU options. Screen-wise, you can have the 144 Hz, 240 Hz, or 4K. Now, compared to the Omen 15T, that can start at GTX 1660 Ti. But in terms of pricing, it's around about a $200 premium for the X2S. They also include a rubber wrist support here, since the keyboard is brought forward, but it does pick up a fair bit of lint and dirt, but it does help for when you're typing. So when you first boot up, the 6-inch display displays the Omen Command Center, which is pretty useful, I think, because you've got the system metrics, download and upload speeds, and temperatures, and CPU and GPU utilization. And it's a touchscreen by default, which you can disable if you wish, but you can change power profiles. Now note there's no fan control. I can't get it to work on this yet. I can on the 15T and the 17T, so I'll keep playing around with that. But of course, again, it shows you the temperatures here. You can change lighting. Now using the touchscreen here, you can do the exterior lighting. So in other words, the Omen symbol here, change the pattern or the color, and whether it's pulsing, that type of thing. But if you want to do the keyboard, you have to use that on the primary display. Now, of course, you can also capture what's on the main display if you like, to put what's on the main screen down on the bottom screen. But it's not so easy to actually try and trace a mini-map from a game. So let's see what happens there. I don't know how to move it around to actually put it on the map itself. Since the extra panel operates just like a second display, you can actually split them into 2 windows, or you can have that as your main window if you like. So it works just like a second display. Perhaps one good use case, you may be wanting to watch a YouTube video on it, perhaps a game tutorial, whilst the main activity is on the main display, of course. So I could see that as being useful. Now, one use case I would find quite useful is having OBS Streamlabs in the second screen down the bottom here. So if you're doing a live stream, or you're actually just recording a gameplay for review or whatever, you can actually see that and go in and then go down here and change the settings. Now, touch is not enabled when in game, but it's good to have that option there. So these buttons up here, Command Center, number pad, turns off and on the backlighting of the display, alter the brightness of it, and this button switches the app to the main display should you wish, and bring it back down. So upon opening both laptops, the 15T and the X2S, the first thing you notice is the keyboard layout. Keys are brought forward here, regular design on the 15T. Of course, consequently on the X2S, the trackpad has been moved to the right and is not as wide. And you still have the individual mouse buttons here, which is very nice to have. And the trackpad, the number pad, could be activated by pressing that button and using the 6-inch panel up top. While of course we've got a separate number pad here. Now the keyboard lighting, you do have RGB key lighting on here, while it's in 4 zones on the 15T. So let's have a look at that key lighting. So the key lighting on the X2S is RGB, And you can have it set to various patterns. Here I have a raindrop pattern. But on the 15T, it's in just 4 different zones and it's static. So from the top, the X2S and the 15T look pretty similar. The main difference is that in these quadrants here, you do have little red speckles while it's totally black here on the 15T. And one thing you'll notice that the Omen symbol here does light up on the X2S. So we're looking at the underside of the X2S and the 15T. To get inside here, you need to remove Torx 6 screws. Sturdy aluminium panel, much the same as you'd get on the 15T. Biggest difference you see is the 73 watt-hour battery, which takes up pretty much the full length of the X2S, meaning you have 2 M.2 slots, which is nice to see. Whilst the 15T has a 69 watt-hour battery, it's shorter, meaning you have a 2.5-inch bay and only 1 M.2 drive. The CPU is here, the GPU, liquid metal on the CPU on the X2S, and you have 1 shared heat pipe, and you have a single one going to a, of course, heatsink here, and you have 2 more heatsinks here. Whilst on the 15T, you do have 2 shared heat pipes for the CPU, which, this is actually having an i9 in it, so it's interesting to see the difference in the cooling. And the speakers do look a little bit different also. So there's quite a size difference between the 2 bricks here. This is the 200 watt brick for the Omen 15T, 2080 Max-Q i9, and the 230 watt brick for the Omen 15 X2S. And that's just got the 2070 Max-Q and the i7. And also, the connectors themselves are totally different too, so you can't use one for the other laptop. So let's look at the ports with the X2S at the bottom and the 15T at the top. So the X2S has a Thunderbolt 3 port on the right hand side and a USB type A port. Both can be used to power say a cell phone when its laptop's turned off, and a much bigger air vent here. Whilst if you want an SD card reader, the 15T is the way to go. Now on the left hand side we have the larger power connector on the X2S compared to the 15T. Both have the Ethernet port, both have HDMI, as well as 2 USB type A ports. And you will notice that the 15T has a separate mini display port, whilst the X2S actually has it incorporated in the Thunderbolt 3 port. And here's the Thunderbolt 3 port for the 15T, and both have combo headphone mic jacks. And around the back, they're both pretty similar. 2 air vents and the Omen engraved at the back. No ports at the back. So on the left hand side we have the X2S and the regular Omen 15T on the right hand side. Both have similar brightness levels of around about 320 nits or so. But I would say the colours look a little bit more, pungent, I suppose, on the X2S. But still, both nice displays. So in terms of ghosting, the 15T on the left and the X2S on the right, certainly the 240 Hz display has less ghosting on it. And you notice that actually, I think even in gameplay, I noticed that it's more smoother and I do prefer it. The CPU is holding a nice clock rate of about 3,800, 3,900 megahertz. Temperature wise, it's settling in around about the mid 80s, with peaks, spikes up there to about 98 degrees. And its package power is settling on about 85 watts. So you know what, that's not too bad a temperature at 85 watts. That's why it's holding a good clock speed. But at 85 watts, this is around about the high 80s there. So not too bad, I guess. So with the default profile, 100% CPU load, we're looking at around a clock speed of about 3,100, 3,200 megahertz. So it does certainly just drop down there. And of course the temperature is less, mid 60s. And of course the power is dropping down then to 45 watts on the default. So Far Cry 5 with Ada64 running, you can see that we're still pulling about 80 watts on the CPU. And of course this is 94 degrees or so. And of course this is high performance mode. The GPU is running nice and cool. So let's switch it to default. And now in default mode, 45 watts on the CPU, Temperature comes down, of course, and the clock rate down to 3100. GPU still holding a nice cool temperature and a nice boost clock. And a difference in frame rate. Far Cry 5 Ultra settings, about 110 FPS or so on default. Let's switch this to performance. And under performance with a higher CPU clock, we're getting around about 120, 125 FPS. So this is Battlefield 5 running on the performance mode. And as you can see, actually the CPU is at least turboing up to 3900, 77 watts. So hence it's about, 90s. CPU now pulling a more reasonable 45 watts. And temperature is certainly, again, a lot more reasonable. So it looks like this mode is probably the best option to do, unless you do some undervolting, which of course I'll do. So there you have it. Quick first look of the Omen 15 X2S. And what do I think of it? Well, I like it. It's fairly light. It's a little bit lighter than the 15T because it has no spinning hard drive in it. Got a 2 M.2 slots, which is nice. It means you can have a slightly larger battery in it too. Still got to test the battery life, of course, and that will be my full review. But the main purpose why you'd buy this unit is because of the 6-inch screen. And, you've got to ask yourself, what is the main benefit of having that versus, if you've got perhaps a monitor kicking around. Perhaps you're out and about and you may want to have a bit more multitasking going on. And certainly you can have whatever, it's a second screen, so you can have whatever you have on a normal external monitor down here. And in fact, you can split the screen and have multiple tabs going and whatnot. Now, you can also screen grab what's on the main screen, but you can't do that for like a map in a game. I couldn't get that to work, and I will try it, but I couldn't get that to work, of course. But you can perhaps snip some instructions, have it down here, and do your main work here. What I found useful for was when I was perhaps doing video game capturing, I can have OBS Streamlabs down here while still having the game here, and I can have a look at my settings and whatnot here. So that was pretty nice. Keyboard brought forward, it's fine for me. You do have the rubber wrist support here. Trackpad, of course, is a little smaller, it's synaptics, but it works well. Separate mouse buttons is nice. I do like the buttons here where you can, switch apps on lower screen to the upper screen, alter the brightness, that type of thing. The Predator Sense software seems okay, although there's no max fan control. I haven't got that yet, and I've done various updates, so that hasn't arrived yet. But in terms of the performance, max performance, of course, about 85 watts, or on single CPU loads, 70 odd watts or so when you're gaming. It's quite high and up there, and of course, even the liquid metal doesn't keep it cool, the CPU on high performance. But default mode, everything drops down to 45 watts, and it's perfectly fine then. So that's a shame. It does push it quite hard. Now, of course, I will do an undervolt and everything, and bring that and try and get max performance working there nicely, because you do lose a little bit in frame rate. Build quality is nice, all aluminium build. Of course, you've got the central hinge, which I haven't had any problems with, but I always make sure I open and close it centrally here, because otherwise you might get a bit of flex on the hinge. But it's got a bit more bling than 15T with that lighting up there, the symbol, and the keyboard itself is fully RGB compared to the 4-zoned on the 15T. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.